So, like, you're saying that Jesus never existed, so all of this was invented somehow.
Well, I'm saying that Jesus never walked on earth, like he never existed in history, but um, I believe that Jesus is prophesized like the Messiah, not specifically Jesus a person, but the Messiah figure of Judaism is predicted in the Old Testament. And then what you have is first century Jews that were reading the Old Testament, expecting a Messiah to come. The Messiah doesn't come, and then they start like hallucinating. This Jesus character. They had been poring over the Old Testament, studying all these things. You have multiple groups that are popping up having different opinions about things. That's why you have like the two different genealogies in the Gospels. You have the varying different ways that Jesus was born. In Matthew, it directly parallels Moses's birth, and in Luke, he interprets different scriptures to mean different things, and so he has to come up with a way for Jesus to be born in one place and then travel and be born in Bethlehem, right?
Well, if we accept that story, then how did they get to this idea that Jesus was crucified? Because there are no clear testaments in the Old Testament that actually say the Messiah is going to be crucified or resurrect from the dead. That's
Well,
not
I
a
mean,
part of it. To quote Michael Cohen, it's just a quote from him.
oh, okay. I've actually got a really good video on my channel where I respond to Capturing Christianity, talking about how they weren't expecting a crucified Messiah. They definitely were expecting like some kind of disgraced and killed Messiah. That's from Old Testament scriptures that you can look up. And we know for a fact that they were looking to the scriptures for information about Jesus. So that would be Paul's Pauline Creed. It's 1 Corinthians 15, 3 through 8, where he talks about how Christ died according to the scriptures. He's talking about where he got his information from, in the scriptures. Not only that, but we also have Philo of Alexandria, who references the book of Zechariah, where it talks about a Messiah figure that is going to raise up and absolve sins and all this other stuff, and sit at the right hand of the Father and everything like that. And Philo was actually a contemporary of Paul, who was writing just a little bit before Paul. And so what you have there is just Paul went one direction while Philo goes kind of another direction with it, along with the other Jews, because the Jews also came up with a similar Messiah story, except they have twin messiahs. Basically, they end up with two messiahs: Messiah ben Joseph and a Messiah ben David. Ben Joseph is the one that dies, and then Ben David is the one that resurrects Joseph so that he can absolve the sins of the Jewish people. So really, you just have to combine those two figures into one person in order to get the Christian theology.
Well, so you're saying they've created these two narratives split apart into two different demographics of Christianity, and then those two narratives are actually combined later and conjoined into
No,
one
no, no,
narrative.
no, no, no. What I'm saying is that there's a Messiah narrative in the Old Testament, right? And the Jews interpreted that to be the two different messiahs, and then the Christians, what would become the Christians, just merge that two Messiah idea into one, and you have Jesus.
Okay, and so you're saying that all of this happened and it was just invented by some of the early Jews, and there was
Well,
no guy named Jesus, and so why would they do all of this? Because it seems most of the story they do describe in like the Gospels does seem to have things like the the Messiah will be born in Bethlehem, but he's not. He's born in Nazareth, or vice versa. Like, why would they make that up? Like, how did that come about? If they're just making up a story, and the Jesus in the Old Testament is, or the Messiah in the Old Testament is prophesied to be born in Bethlehem, why not just have him born in Bethlehem?
well, because of how they interpreted the scriptures. They interpreted the scriptures with him being like one nationality, but then being prophesized as being born in another place. Like I believe, let's see, what is it? They refer to him as the branch which is supposed to allude to him being from Nazareth, is one particular thing. Now in Matthew, what they have is they have him being born in Bethlehem, and then they leave and go to Egypt and then come back. That's a direct mirror of Moses.
Yeah, but wasn't he born in Nazareth? Like, why? Where does that connection come from?
Well, I told you the scriptures. I mean, the
So you're
scriptures.
saying they like interpreted the Old Testament wrong? They got it wrong, and then they interpreted
No,
it to
I,
or they interpreted it one way, and then they interpreted it a different way, and they had to try and make the story match their second interpretation.
well, no, 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 no. I mean, are you under the idea that there was just one group that was Christians in the first century?
No, there's many of them, of course. Like,
Well, right. So there's many different groups of Christians in the first century. I mean, if you look at the Nag Hammadi library, you have several different references there to different versions of the same Christ character. Did you know, Tom? You're going to like this. Did you know that there's a version of Christ who takes Mary up on a mountain, and looking her directly in the face, he pulls out a copy of another woman, fucks her, shoots his load inside her, and then reaches inside, pulls out his load and eats it, looks her dead in the face, and says, "Do this in remembrance of me." I mean, they believed a lot of different things at that time. If you doubt me on that, just look up Bart Ehrman. Frick, I forgot which book that's in. One of Bart Ehrman's books where he's talking about the different Jesuses that were supposed to that people supposedly believed in. He talks about that being in one of these manuscripts. So. There were a wide range of different Jewish Christians at the time. They were all interpreting these old scriptures differently, and it's not so much they weren't inventing, like it wasn't like an invention, right? Because invention kind of seems like it's something made out of nothing, right? Or made up out of whole cloth. But what they were doing was they were taking existing Jewish theology and trying to figure out, as a matter of their faith, what to expect from Jesus. And then instead of Jesus actually coming, they assumed that that he already came and he absolved their sins, and then they started hallucinating him, right? Because I mean, you don't think that celestial Jesus actually revealed himself to Paul, right?
no, but I would think that the idea that they hallucinated him just based off a conception they made up in their head is far less likely than like a bereavement delusion where they had an experience of some person who they were really like enthralled with, and then that person died, and then they started to have hallucinations like most people, because bereavement delusions are really common. If you have a loved one you die and you can see them after or hear them after, and you have really vivid experiences of experiencing them after their death, and that's a common thing that we know of. Whereas hallucinating someone you've just envisioned in your head based off of other kinds of older texts doesn't really happen that much. That's not really a common thing.
Well, I mean, it. So the fact is that Paul says that Jesus, told him all of this stuff through revelation, right? He never, like Paul never met this Jesus person. They didn't have Polaroids back then. They couldn't take pictures of him. So it's not like they knew like what he looked like and all this other stuff. They didn't draw a picture of Jesus, right? But since Paul never met him, how could he envision somebody that he never met, never saw, he only heard about?
Well, didn't he hear about him through torturing Christians who told him most likely?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, he was torturing Christians, or he was killing Christians. He was persecuting the church, is what he says. So, but my point is that Paul didn't have a connection like to Jesus, like you're suggesting. Like I could understand that for anybody that supposedly knew Jesus in his life, right? But we don't have evidence that anybody knew Jesus during his life.
Well, don't we have? Doesn't Paul specifically mention that he went to go see like the brother James, the brother of Jesus?
So that particular passage, if you look at the Greek, it's actually ambiguous, so it doesn't really help either my case or your case. But the language there is used to indicate either a blood relationship to the person or a fictive kinship through like a cult or religion, right? That those are both of the meanings that are used right there. And if you look up other uses of it, you'll see that it's used in either case, so it's actually kind of ambiguous. But one thing that helps my side of this is that Paul has this theology of brothers of the Lord, right? So there were anybody that was a baptized Christian was considered a brother of the Lord. He says this multiple times in his writings, that anybody who believes in Christ, who lives in Christ, who's reborn through Christ, is also a brother of the Lord, a brother and sister. So unless you want to say that everybody that he refers to is a brother of Christ or a sister, even when Paul is talking about bringing sisters with him, or apostles bringing sisters with them as their wives on mission trips and to go and preach, unless you mean that they're literal sisters there, which I'm not going to rule out sister fucking in first century Judea, but I'm just saying that it's kind of inconsistent to take that one particular passage as meaning a blood brother when you have all of these other passages that seem to contradict the specific use of that phrase as being a blood brother.
Well, even if we do interpret it as like a same kind of a like follower kind of relationship, the fact that he went to go meet these two guys who supposedly knew Jesus seems to be kind of like indicative of the fact, regardless of whether or not they were literal brothers, that there was a guy named Jesus there.
Well, no. Because Paul never suggests that they knew Jesus. He only says that one of them was an apostle and the other one was a general Christian.
Right, but like apostle, doesn't apostle mean one of the apostles who were specifically working with Jesus? Not like
Nope.
not just anybody could be an apostle.
No. Not anybody could be an apostle. To be an apostle, and Paul lays this out specifically in all of his work, is that to be an apostle, you just had to have had a revelation of Jesus. Having a revelation of Jesus is very different from knowing Jesus in real life, wouldn't you say?
Sure, but as far as I know, he's the only one who had that. Like all the other apostles were supposedly knew him,
No.
like because there are lots of people who claim to have revelations of Jesus. That's a really common thing, especially at the time period. Most of them did not claim to be apostles.
Wait, name another person that was writing that claimed to be an apostle.
I don't know if they're well, yeah, none of them claim to be apostles, but the whole idea that, like you mentioned, that people would have visions of Jesus, that's a
Right.
really common thing if you would be a religious person and believe in Jesus, potentially.
Right.
But they wouldn't all just be apostles because they had a vision of Jesus.
That's the only criteria that Paul states in his writings. When he talks about the which I think it's actually, let's see, 1 Corinthians 15:3-8, I believe is where it says it. Hold on, let me see if I can pull this up real quick. Yes, so at the very end of that, he says, "Then he appeared to James, then to all the apostles. And last of all, he appeared to me also, as to one abnormally born." Now, he's talking about James, like the just, one of the pillars of Christianity, who was an apostle at that point, right? And to all the other apostles. Apostle just means that he received revelation of Jesus. Now, that was the only way that you could be an apostle, but he also doesn't talk about how there were other people claiming to be apostles, to be preaching from a revealed Jesus. I do believe there's another passage. What is it? Maybe it's in Galatia. I think it might have been one of the Galatians. It might have been Galatians 2, where he talks about how people were preaching other Jesuses. Like these other people are preaching these other Jesuses, but the one that I revealed to you is the true one. He goes around and he tells them that. So there definitely were plenty of people going around claiming to have visions of Jesus, claiming to be preaching this gospel. And Paul was like, no. They're not legit. I'm legit. And these other guys, they're legit. In Galatians 2, I know he comes back to Jerusalem to confirm the gospel that he was preaching with the other people he considered to be true apostles of Jesus. But the key point here, and I don't want to get too sidetracked, is the fact that he never identifies anybody as a disciple. An apostle does not mean disciple.